Welcome to English Listening Stories. Hi, my name is Alina. In this channel, I share real emotional stories about life, love, friendship, and the lessons we learn. Each story is told in simple English, perfect for beginners who want to practice listening and understand deep feelings. So, take a deep breath, relax, and let's begin today's story. It's not just about learning English, it's about feeling every word. Simple English for beginners means using clear, easy, to understand language that helps new learners of English follow along without confusion. Many people around the world want to improve their English, but they feel nervous or lost when they hear fast speech or difficult vocabulary. That's why it's important to create stories that use short sentences, familiar words, and a slow, natural pace. When someone is learning a new language, they need time to understand each word, each phrase, and how ideas are connected. If the language is too fast or complex, they might stop listening, lose confidence, or even give up. But when they hear a story in simple English, it builds their interest and gives them hope. They feel like, yes, I can do this. That feeling is very powerful. In English listening stories, the goal is not just to tell a story, but to make sure that every listener, even a beginner, can follow the emotions, understand the situation, and feel connected to the characters. This is done by using words that are commonly used in daily life, words that someone might learn in their first few months of studying English. Instead of saying betrayed, you might say hurt me or did something wrong to me, instead of saying relationship. You might say he was my boyfriend, or we were together. It's not about removing all deep ideas, it's about expressing them in a way that is easy to follow. Many people think that simple English means boring English. That is not true. Simple English can be beautiful, emotional, and full of meaning. The power is in how you tell the story, not how big the words are. Another part of using simple English is repetition. In these stories, you often hear a word or idea more than once. This helps learners remember. For example, if a story says, I felt pain, my heart was full of pain, I cried because of the pain, the listener hears the word pain again and again in different ways. That helps the word become part of their memory. It's like hearing the same song many times, the words stay with you. This kind of repetition is not just for practice. It's for emotion too. When someone says, I was sad, so sad, every night I cried, the listener feels the sadness and also learns how to express it. That's the magic of simple storytelling. The speed of speaking is also important. In English listening stories, the speaker talks slowly with natural pauses. This gives the listener time to think, to understand, and to feel. Many beginner learners get lost when native speakers talk too fast. Even if they know the words, they can't catch them. But when the speech is slow and calm, they can follow the story and learn how the words sound together. This also helps with pronunciation. A learner who listens carefully can repeat the sentences in their mind or out loud. They begin to speak more confidently because they hear how real English sounds, not the English of textbooks, but the English of people. Using simple English also makes these stories universal. A person in India, Brazil, Egypt, or Thailand can all understand and enjoy the same story. They don't need a dictionary every 5 seconds. They don't feel lost. They feel included. That is very important. Many learners feel shy or embarrassed about their English level. But when they understand a story from start to finish, they feel proud. That is a small victory, and small victories lead to big success. The stories become like teachers, but gentle ones. They don't give tests. They don't judge. They just speak slowly and simply and help people grow. The topics in these stories are also chosen with care. Love, trust, heartbreak, friendship, these are ideas everyone understands, no matter their language. When a story talks about a broken friendship or a person who felt sad and alone, the listener doesn't need fancy vocabulary to understand. They already know those feelings, so even if the words are new, the emotions are familiar. That makes learning easier. It builds a bridge between the language the learner knows and the language they are learning. Simple English is the tool that connects both sides. Another reason to use Simple English is that it creates a safe space. Listeners are not afraid to try. They don't feel like the content is too hard or not for them. When the language is simple, they feel welcome. They listen more, they come back again, and slowly they improve. Some people might say, this story is too easy. But for a beginner, that easy story is a gift. It's a step forward. It's a door opening. And inside that door is a whole new world of language, emotion, and connection. Real, life emotional stories create a strong connection between the speaker and the listener. When a person hears something that feels true, that sounds like it could happen in their own life, they pay more attention. They feel the emotions deeply. They begin to care about the characters, the decisions they make, and the results of those choices. In English listening stories, this emotional connection is one of the most important parts. The stories are not just exercises in grammar or vocabulary. They are stories about pain, love, mistakes, trust, and growth, things every human experiences. That's what makes them powerful, especially for language learners who want to improve not just by listening to dry information, but by feeling something real. When learners hear emotional stories in real-life settings, they not only learn English, they understand how English is used in everyday conversations, in moments of love or sadness, in small arguments and big betrayals. These are the types of situations they may face in their own lives. So, by listening to these stories, they also learn how to express their own emotions. They hear the words someone uses when they are heartbroken. They learn what someone says when they're sorry or when they feel betrayed. These are not phrases you find in a textbook. They come from real people, from real situations, and they make the language come alive in a way no grammar rule ever can. Real, life, emotional stories also help people reflect on their own feelings. For example, when a listener hears a story about a girl who lost her best friend because of love, they might remember a time when they felt the same pain. They relate. That memory comes back, and with it, a deeper understanding of the story. This connection makes the learning experience more personal and more memorable. The English being learned is no longer just a subject, it becomes a tool for understanding life, for naming emotions, for telling one's own story. It gives learners the words to talk about their own heartbreaks, their friendships, their regrets, and their hopes. The emotional depth in these stories also keeps the listener interested. A good story has tension. It starts with something normal, then something changes, a mistake is made, a secret is discovered, a relationship is tested. These changes make the listener want to know what happens next. Will the characters stay together? Will the friend say sorry? Will the person become stronger or stay broken? This curiosity keeps people listening, which is very important for language learning. The more you listen, the more you learn, but people won't listen unless they care, and they won't care unless the story touches their heart. That's why emotion is a strong learning tool. Real, life emotional stories are also a safe way to explore feelings. Some people may not talk about their pain in real life. They may not have the words to explain what they went through. But when they hear a story that sounds like their own, they feel seen. They realize they are not alone. The character in the story cried just like they cried. The character made a mistake, just like they did. That moment of connection brings comfort, and it makes learning feel human. It turns language into something more than just rules and verbs. It becomes a way to understand and express the deepest parts of being human. These stories also reflect a wide range of emotions. They are not always about happiness or success. Sometimes they are about regret, shame, jealousy, or loss. These emotions are important too. Learners need to hear how to talk about sadness, not just joy. They need words for heartbreak, not just celebration. In English listening stories, the full range of human feeling is explored with honesty and care. This helps the listener learn how to speak about real things, not just what is in the dictionary. They learn to say things like, I felt empty. I was broken inside. I couldn't stop crying. Or, I forgave them, but I don't want them in my life. These are the kinds of sentences that come from the heart, and learners remember them because they mean something. Also, emotional stories help listeners understand tone and voice. It's not just about what you say, but how you say it. When the storyteller pauses, speaks slowly, or changes their tone, it helps the listener understand the feeling behind the words. This teaches more than grammar, it teaches expression, the rhythm of emotion in language. Learners hear the sadness in a slow sentence, or the tension in a pause. They begin to copy those patterns in their own speech. This helps them speak not just correctly, but naturally and with feeling. Focus on love, trust, and betrayal gives English listening stories a deep emotional core that connects instantly with listeners. These themes are timeless and universal. People from all cultures and backgrounds understand the feeling of falling in love, the importance of trusting someone, and the pain of being betrayed. When a story talks about these emotions, it reaches the heart of the listener, no matter their level of English. This emotional closeness makes the learning experience more meaningful. The words are not just sounds or grammar lessons, they are real, living expressions of something the listener has felt or seen in their own life. That connection builds interest and helps with memory. People remember what touches them deeply. When learners hear a story about love, they become more engaged. Love is something beautiful, exciting, and often confusing. It brings joy, fear, and hope. In English listening stories, love is shown not as a perfect dream, but as something real and sometimes messy. A person meets someone, feels butterflies, starts talking, and slowly builds a relationship. This process is told in simple English, with words like I liked him, he made me smile, or we talked every day. These are easy phrases, but they carry strong emotion. Learners hear how to describe feelings in a natural way. They also learn how to tell a story with feeling not just what happened, but how it felt. Trust is another key part of these stories. Trust is the invisible thread that holds relationships together. When someone says, I trusted her, or he knew all my secrets, it shows closeness. It tells the listener that something deep and valuable existed between two people. But trust is also fragile. That's why, when trust is broken, the pain is so strong. These stories often show how that pain begins. A late message, a strange smile, a lie that starts small. The listener learns not only the vocabulary for trust and betrayal, but also how to recognize the signs of a changing relationship. They begin to understand phrases like, I felt something was wrong, he was hiding something, or she was not honest. These lines teach more than language, they teach life. Betrayal is one of the strongest themes in these stories because it leaves a deep emotional mark. When a character is betrayed by someone they love, a friend or a partner, the listener feels that shock. They hear the character say, I could not believe it, or my heart broke. These are simple sentences, but they carry heavy emotion. Learners remember these moments because betrayal is something many people have experienced. The pain, the confusion, the silence that follows these are powerful parts of life, and expressing them in English helps learners deal with their own feelings. It gives them the language to talk about things they may not have shared before. These three themes, love, trust, and betrayal, also help build dramatic tension in a story. A story that starts with happiness and then slowly moves into sadness keeps the listener curious. They want to know what will happen next. Will the friend say sorry? Will the boyfriend tell the truth? Will the main character forgive them? This emotional movement from one feeling to another mirrors real life. It helps learners practice the kind of English they will hear in movies, in conversations, and maybe even in their own relationships. They learn how to talk about change, not just physical change, but emotional change. The language around these themes is often personal and direct. I loved him. I trusted her. I was hurt. I cried all night. These are sentences spoken from the heart. They use first-person language, which is very helpful for learners. It teaches them how to talk about themselves in English, instead of just saying, I like music, or I go to school. They learn to say, I felt alone, or I couldn't stop thinking about him. These are deeper, more human sentences, and they help learners connect their emotions to their English skills. This makes them more confident when speaking about their own lives. These stories also show how relationships affect other parts of life. When love brings happiness, the world feels bright. When trust is broken, everything feels dark. The listener hears how the character stops eating, avoids friends, or deletes photos. These actions are described in simple English, but they paint a clear emotional picture. Learners begin to see how emotions lead to behavior and how to describe that in another language. They hear how pain sounds, how healing begins, and how people move forward after heartbreak. These are powerful lessons wrapped inside easy to understand stories. Simple vocabulary and short sentences play a powerful role in English listening stories. They make the story easy to understand for beginners and help listeners focus on the emotion and meaning behind the words. When a person is just starting to learn English, complex grammar and big words can feel confusing. It becomes difficult to follow a story, especially when emotions are involved. But when a story is told with simple language, the listener can relax. They don't have to stop and think about every word. They can just feel the story, understand what's happening, and connect with the characters. This kind of simplicity creates space for emotional depth. It allows the story to breathe and the feelings to grow. Short sentences help build rhythm. They make the story sound more natural, like real conversation. In everyday life, people don't speak in long, complicated paragraphs. They speak in small, direct phrases. They say things like, I was sad, he left, she smiled at me. These are the kinds of sentences that learners hear in English listening stories. They are easy to repeat, easy to remember, and very useful in daily life. Learners begin to use them in their own speech. They don't worry about being perfect, they focus on being real. This boosts confidence. A learner who can say, I loved him, but he lied to me, is already using the language to express something personal. That is a huge step forward in speaking a new language. Simple vocabulary also helps with emotional understanding. Words like cry, happy, angry, and tired may seem basic, but they are powerful. These are the words people use when they are feeling something strong. They are the words that come out when someone is hurt, excited, nervous, or heartbroken. In English listening stories, these words are repeated in many different ways. This repetition helps learners hear them in different contexts. For example, I was tired might mean someone didn't sleep, or it might mean they are tired of a relationship. The listener begins to understand how emotions change meaning depending on the situation. That is a deeper kind of learning, one that stays in the memory longer. Short sentences also build tension. When a story is about love, trust, and betrayal, the emotions often rise quickly. Short lines like "he didn't answer," "she looked away," "I saw the message," and "my heart stopped" hit hard. They are sharp, emotional moments that stand alone. The listener feels each one. These lines don't need big words. They are strong because they are simple. This kind of writing teaches learners how to tell their own stories in English. It shows them that they don't need to know every word in the dictionary to express deep feelings. They just need the right few words said with honesty. Simple language also helps keep the story clear. A beginner listener may not catch every single word, but if the vocabulary is easy and the sentences are short, they can still follow the story. They can guess what's happening from the emotion in the voice, from the repetition of key phrases, and from the natural structure of the story. This builds listening skills. It trains the ear to recognize the rhythm of English. Over time, learners begin to hear patterns. They understand how English flows in real speech, not just in textbooks. Using short sentences also allows the storyteller to slow down and let each moment matter. When someone says, "She was my best friend, I trusted her, I loved her," each sentence gives the listener time to feel. There is no rush. Each idea stands alone. This kind of storytelling invites the listener to connect emotionally, not just intellectually. It gives them time to think about their own experiences. Maybe they had a friend they trusted. Maybe they loved someone who hurt them. Those feelings rise quietly while they listen. The short sentences leave space for that. Even grammar becomes easier with simple language. Learners hear correct sentence structure again and again. "I met him. We went to a cafe. He smiled." These are examples of correct English in action. When learners hear these patterns often, they begin to speak in the same way. They don't need to memorize rules, they learn through example. This is one of the most natural ways to learn a language. It is the way children learn. It is the way people learn when they are surrounded by real, emotional stories told in a language they want to speak. Repetition also plays a big role. When a phrase like "I was happy" or "she betrayed me" is used more than once, it becomes familiar. It sticks in the listener's mind. Later, when they feel that same emotion, they might remember that sentence. They might use it in their own speech. That's the power of simple, emotional storytelling. It teaches through feeling, not just through facts. Emotional storytelling in English listening stories is more than just entertainment. It is a powerful tool for language learning. When a story includes real feelings like love, pain, confusion, or hope, it becomes more than just words. It becomes a journey that the listener experiences with the speaker. This emotional connection makes the language more meaningful. A listener who feels something while hearing a story is more likely to remember the words, phrases, and grammar used. Emotions activate memory in a deep way. That's why people often remember emotional moments from years ago, but forget facts they just learned. When English is taught through emotional stories, it sticks in the mind and becomes part of the learner's life. These stories are often told in the first person, using simple, clear language. The speaker says things like "I felt sad," "my heart was broken," or "I trusted him." These are not just grammar exercises. They are pieces of real experience. The listener begins to understand how English is used to express emotion, not just to describe things. Learning how to say "the car is red" is one thing. But learning how to say "I felt hurt when he lied to me" is much more powerful. It gives the learner the ability to talk about their own feelings in English, to express who they are, what they have lived through, and what they care about. Emotional stories also help listeners develop empathy. When a story describes betrayal, the listener feels that sting. When it talks about losing a friend, the listener may remember someone they lost. These moments create a bridge between the story and the listener's own experience. That connection makes the language feel more personal. The listener is not just learning English. They are using English to feel and understand the world. This kind of emotional depth makes English listening stories special. It's not just about teaching vocabulary. It's about building a relationship between the story and the listener's heart. When the speaker shares a painful experience, like being betrayed by a best friend or a boyfriend, the listener doesn't just hear the story, they feel it. They imagine the hurt, the confusion, the late night crying, the silence after a fight. These moments are described with simple, powerful sentences like "I couldn't sleep," "I deleted all the photos," "I felt empty." These are not advanced phrases, but they are full of emotion. They teach how to talk about pain in English. They show how to use language to process feelings, to explain what happened, and to begin healing. Emotional storytelling also introduces cultural understanding. The way people talk about feelings in English might be different from how they do in their native language. English listening stories give learners examples of how to express things like love, jealousy, regret, or forgiveness in natural English. They hear how native speakers describe emotional events. They learn that it's okay to say, "I made a mistake," or "I want to be better." These phrases are not just language lessons, they are life lessons. They help the listener grow emotionally as well as linguistically. These stories also help with speaking skills. After hearing an emotional story, learners often want to respond. They want to tell their own story. They might say, "That happened to me," or "I felt like that once." This desire to speak is a powerful motivator. It moves learners from passive listening to active speaking. They begin to use the emotional vocabulary they heard. They try to build sentences that describe their own lives. This is how real language learning happens, not through memorizing rules, but through personal expression. Another benefit of emotional storytelling is that it holds attention. A learner might forget a grammar rule after one day, but they will remember a story that made them feel something. That story stays with them. They think about it later. They may even tell it to someone else in their own words. This retelling is another chance to practice English. It helps them use the same phrases and emotions again, which reinforces learning. Every time they share or remember the story, the language becomes stronger in their mind. The emotional arc of these stories also teaches structure. Most stories begin with happiness, move into conflict, reach a painful moment, and then start to recover. This natural flow helps learners understand how to build a story. They learn to use phrases like "at first," "then," "but one day," "after that," and "finally." These transitions are important in storytelling and everyday conversation. They help the listener understand what happened and when. By hearing this structure in emotional stories, learners begin to copy it in their own speech. They learn how to organize their thoughts in English, not just translate from their own language. Through emotional storytelling, English becomes a tool for healing, sharing, and connecting. Learners discover that language is not just about speaking, it's about being heard. It's about telling the truth, expressing feelings, and finding understanding. English listening stories show that even simple words, when filled with real emotion, can be incredibly powerful. Repetition and rhythm are two powerful techniques used in English listening stories that help beginner learners absorb language naturally. When a word or sentence is repeated several times throughout a story, it becomes easier to remember. The brain gets used to hearing the same sounds and patterns, and slowly those patterns start to feel familiar. This is especially useful for new English learners who might feel nervous or overwhelmed by too many new words. Repetition gives them something to hold on to. It tells the listener, "This is important, listen again." And because the context is emotional, the repeated words carry weight. They aren't just grammar exercises. They are tied to real feelings and moments in the story. For example, in a story about love and betrayal, you might hear the phrase, "I trusted her," more than once. It might come after a happy moment, and then again after a painful one. Each time it's repeated, the meaning feels stronger. At first, it sounds like love. Later, it sounds like disappointment. This change in emotion, paired with the same words, teaches the listener how feelings can shift with context. It's a very deep kind of learning that goes beyond vocabulary. The listener doesn't just learn the phrase, "I trusted her." They learn what it feels like to say those words with joy, and what it feels like to say them with sadness. Repetition also helps with pronunciation. When a word or phrase comes again and again, the learner begins to say it in their mind. They hear the sounds more clearly. They practice silently at first, and then maybe they speak it out loud. This kind of unconscious practice is very helpful. It builds speaking confidence without pressure. Learners feel like they know the story, they know the words, they're not afraid to repeat them. Over time, their accent improves, their voice grows stronger, and they start using these repeated phrases in their own daily life. Rhythm is another important tool in English listening stories. Stories are written with a natural flow, like how people speak in real life. They're not robotic or overly formal. They move like a conversation, with pauses, short sentences, and a gentle beat. This rhythm helps the story feel alive. It pulls the listener in. They don't feel like they are sitting in a classroom. They feel like someone is talking to them, like a friend sharing something important. This friendly rhythm is easier to follow than academic English. It lets the learner focus on the emotion and story rather than getting stuck in complex grammar. Rhythm also helps listeners predict what's coming next. When sentences follow a pattern like "I cried," "I waited," "I hoped," the brain starts to expect the next word. This is good for language learning. It teaches learners how sentences are built, how thoughts are connected. They begin to understand how English flows. They might even start guessing what the speaker will say next. This builds confidence and improves listening skills. It also helps learners feel more connected to the language. It's not just something they study, it becomes something they feel inside. When repetition and rhythm work together, they create a strong learning experience. Think about how children learn language. They hear the same words again and again, always in a natural rhythm. That's why they learn so quickly. English listening stories use the same idea, but with stories meant for adult stories with love, pain, friendship, and mistakes. These stories use repeating words and emotional rhythms to help the listener not just understand English, but feel it in their heart. Another way repetition helps is by reinforcing key grammar points without making the learner think about grammar rules. For instance, if the phrase "he didn't answer" is used several times in the story, the learner hears how negative past tense is formed. They don't need to study grammar books to understand that "didn't" plus verb means the action didn't happen. They learn it by hearing it in action, in a moment that means something emotionally. The story teaches grammar naturally, like a song teaches rhythm through feeling, not explanation. Repetition also makes the story comforting. Even when the subject is sad or painful, the repeated phrases give a sense of safety. The listener knows what's coming, they feel in control. This emotional safety helps reduce stress while learning. It makes it easier to focus, to understand, and to remember. The listener begins to look forward to hearing the same words again. They feel proud when they recognize them, when they understand them without needing translation. Rhythm also teaches pacing. In English, how you say something is often just as important as what you say. A pause after a sentence can make it more powerful. A sudden change in speed can show surprise or fear. English listening stories use this pacing to create emotion. The listener begins to notice these changes. They feel the difference between "I was happy," said calmly, and "I was happy," said quickly or with tears. This helps them develop a deeper ear for the language, to feel the music inside the words. All of this builds a more emotional and intuitive understanding of English. Learners aren't just memorizing words, they're living the language through rhythm and repetition. They hear the same sentences many times, always tied to real feelings. This makes the language part of their emotional memory. Later, when they want to speak about their own life, those same phrases come back naturally. They are already inside them, ready to be used with honesty and confidence.